Hello, and welcome to the Chris McPherson Show. Another weekly Around the Grounds episode coming in to you. All the black and white of your sports opinion. No greys here. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the bell down below as well. That'll give you some notifications when we drop each of our episodes, whether it's our weekly Around the Grounds or our daily doses when they pop in as well. We are here today talking a lot of your sporting landscape. You can, of course, keep up to date with us during the week as well with our social media channels. You can find us on Instagram, on X, on TikTok, and on Facebook at The Chris Mack Show. But today we are here, as I said, to talk around the grounds, and I am joined by Lachlan Abel from Roundball Australia. Hello, Lockie.
Hello, Chris.
And Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. Bro, it's good to see you again.
Thanks for having me, boys.
Well, let's kick things off with the AFL Finals. We're into week 2. Brody, I know I'm going to be digging into some wounds here, but mate, takeaways from week 1. What are we looking ahead to for week 2? This is very much your wheelhouse.
It is. I was actually at the match on Thursday night last week. Took the old man over, and geez, it was a hostile environment. I learned more words in the first quarter of football than I reckon I have in my life from both supporters. So, no, look, it was an absolute cauldron of, there was a lot of Collingwood fans there, and they were just as loud as, what felt like 40,000 Adelaide supporters at the same time. And it was a really good match of footy. And I think, you can talk about finals experience, and we often talk about this regardless of what sport we talk about, but you could really see watching it, especially up close. There were 23 players from Collingwood who played a finals brand of footy, and I reckon there would have been 6 or 7 Adelaide players in this one. And first 5 or 10 minutes of the final, Collingwood just brought just manic pressure around the ball and around the player. And after that, they sort of backed off. And then every time Adelaide got the ball, they just had this perceived pressure around them, and they were fumbly when they didn't need to be. They were bombing down the line instead of hitting the 45s and hitting the short targets, which are on. But they just panicked, and it fell straight into Collingwood's hands, which when you start playing like that, Darcy Moore doesn't even stand a man. He just goes out and reads the ball and starts intercepting. So Collingwood played the game on their terms. And I think the scoreline actually flattered Adelaide. Being there live, it felt like, a 6 or 7 goal win to Collingwood. And I think they move straight to the prelim final. But Friday night's game for me, I said at the start that I reckon the grand final winner is going to come out of this game. And halfway through the match, I thought, well and truly, Geelong are the team to beat here. Would have been further in front if not for that double free kick goal, which was probably one of the worst decisions you'll see this year, let alone in a final, compared to the night before where they let a lot of things go. And look, Geelong came out there, and we see it so often. They manage their players so well. I mean, Patrick Dangerfield went out there and was playing like he was in his late 20s again. They put him in the midfield for a little bit, and he was just bursting from stoppages. But Tom Atkins, I think he's the ace up their sleeve this year. He's such a defensive midfielder, which then allows the likes of Bailey Smith, Brian Myers, Max Holmes just to run forward to the ball. And Geelong, for me, without a doubt, the team to beat from the 2 qualifying finals.
Yeah, certainly there's some interesting matchups this week. You talk obviously about those 2 going through. Out of the other games, we saw the Gold Coast not only appear in the finals for the first time, get a W. And as I said, that might have stung a little bit, Broads. But then on the other side, Hawthorn as well on the road. 2, teams that, people sort of said, look, they've got the ability, but they've got road trips in front of them. How are they going to handle those road trips? Well, they handled them with aplomb. The Gold Coast by the narrowest of margins, but, what they say in the Fast and the Furious, doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. And, obviously being a Fremantle supporter, I watched all of this one, and Gold Coast deserved to win this one. And actually, it would have been one that if Fremantle had won this match, they obviously had that really good last quarter. I would have probably come out of it and think, geez, we got lucky there. Gold Coast dominated us all night. And you look at all the best players, and obviously there's so much talk around Matty Rao, Noah Anderson, but I think they were actually nullified by the likes of Brayshaw and Sarong. I think big Jared Witts doesn't get enough credit. I think it's one of the most underrated ruckmen in the AFL, but I think it was Gold Coast small forwards that really won it for him. Bailey Humphrey having that 3-goal burst, but Ben Long, what a year he's having for the Gold Coast Suns. And then you look up the other end for Fremantle, and Michael Frederick had 2 or 3 really big moments that he'd definitely rather forget, playing on from a free kick that didn't need to be played on, hitting the post from running into an open goal as well. And it's little moments like that which come back to bite you in a grand final. And then you look at Hawthorn. Their small forwards really got to work, but it was their midfield dominance. Obviously, you talk so much about the GWS midfield, having Josh Kelly as a sub, Finn Callahan, but GWS actually had an extra 16 inside 50s in this one. But every time Hawthorn went inside 50, they just hit their targets, and we've seen it all year. Jack Gunston's such a smart footballer. Mabior Chol, And I think it just comes down to who can use the ball better when you are going to have these tight games. And we saw that with both elimination finals going the way of the team were probably a little bit more settled across the entirety of the game.
Yeah, it certainly was pretty comprehensive, as you say, from Hawthorn. They managed to take their chances inside that 450. Lockie, I guess as we look to week 2 of the finals, something that I didn't think I'd see anytime soon, an all-Queensland clash in an AFL final. We thought that the Gold Coast were allergic to finals, and all of a sudden they actually head in, and I reckon they're a chance actually to get through to week 3 here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We saw Lockie Neal go off at the end of the Lions game with his calf injury. He's been ruled out. I know they'll say he'll do his best if they get to the grand final by the end of the month, but he's definitely out of this game. No Eric Hipwood as well, and I think the most dangerous part of this is the journey that the Gold Coast Suns are on. And obviously, as a Richmond supporter, I'm quite familiar with Damien Hardwick and how he likes to spin those storylines. And I think the way he managed the occasion for the Suns, especially with David Swallow being picked in the team, and then the fact that he's the one that kicks the point that is deterministic in winning them their first ever final as a football club. Just the fact that that is the journey they're on, and they all feel, like this is a special moment. And we know that when it comes to finals footy and finals sport in any code, that there's that, extra kind of quality about it. And Brodie alluded to finals experience. That's certainly part of it as well. But there's also that intangible in terms of how coaches can motivate their players to go that extra step and really fight for each other and push in the same direction. And for me, Damien Hardwick is one of the best coaches in the competition at doing that. And I think we definitely saw it with their win over Freo on the weekend. And I think going into what will be an understrength Brisbane Lions team in what Damien Hardwick himself called one of the biggest matches, in Queensland. Might have forgotten that he won a grand final up there. But it's going to be a very cool occasion, and hopefully they can kick on. And I think they just might.
Yeah, I think to that point, he's like a mentalist, isn't he, Damien Hardwick? We've seen that, all the work that he did at Richmond and some of the belief that he enshrined in that team. It was wonderful. Before we jump off the AFL, I do want to touch on something that's emerged this afternoon. Brodie, Lockie, I don't know if you've seen this. The Bailey Smith, you talked about him before. He's had a bit of a confrontation with a photographer. Is this a storm in a teacup, Bros? I can see you pulling faces already.
It is. It 100% is. And look, it's one of those things. Look, should he have done it? Absolutely not. Is it as big of a deal as they're making it out to be? Absolutely not. Like he's sitting there getting a rub down on his groin, let's be honest, and photographer's going up trying to get a photo of him, and he's flipped the bird to him, and by the sounds of it, they've had a few run-ins this year. So I don't think he would have said that, to a regular photographer doing that for the first time, but he's had run-ins with this one photographer, and he's sitting there trying to get a bit of a rub down. I just think know your time and place. If you are going to be a photographer with the AFL as well, that's probably not the best time to be doing it.
It's an interesting one, Lockie. I mean, again, I think it is a bit of a storm in a teacup. I don't like, but I note that, a lot of the media outlets straight away talking about it being a female photographer and trying to play that angle. I don't think that's really relevant, but, it's not like he drank out of a toilet and posted on his own social media.
Well, if you're really trying to get one up on the rugby league codes, I guess you can say that. But look, no, I'm with Brodie. It's a bit of nothing. I think we know what we're going to get out of Bailey Smith now. If you piss him off, well, then you're probably going to get the bird. I think there's a few supporters on the fence at footy games this year that could tell you the same story. So, look, he'll cop his fine and he'll pay his $500 and move on. But, yeah, I think a bit of nothing.
Yeah, I think he'll get a little slap on the wrist, a be better. And, at the end of the day, it's a fine line. I think we've talked about it before. We kind of want some personality. And I feel like he tiptoes that line a bit, but, we certainly don't want to lose that of Bailey Smith because it's part of what makes his character and what makes him fascinating, I think, for a lot of the fans. But while we talk rugby league, let's transition to rugby league. And I've got something here I want to talk to you boys about. We've got the finals this weekend, the first week of NRL. And I know neither of you, NRL is certainly probably in your top 1 or 2 sports. But when we have a look at the fixtures, Penrith, who have won 4 in a row, are heading over to New Zealand to play an elimination final. Now, this is a big thing for Penrith because there was all the talk the other week. They rested a lot of players. But we've now got Warriors fans, and there was one in particular who's posted in a fan group basically just suggesting that all Warriors fans should park themselves outside Penrith's hotel the night before the game from 1 to 4 a.m, do burnouts, set off fireworks, and then even talked about if the Warriors get down by enough, just run out in the field and tackle some players.
Love it. I love it. I'm all so for
good.
it.
I think it's an interesting thing, right? Because like people are going, oh, the police need to do something about this. But both of you can probably touch on this and would know the heritage of some of these things. Like South American teams used to do this all the time. The Socceroos went through this going, in the intercontinental playoffs back in the day. There's lots of stories of, loud music, DJs being, played, set out outside, venues and hotels and stuff and just minimising their sleep. Is this just Lockie fair game? It's part of the home ground advantage. If you're good enough, and get some noise-cancelling headphones if you're a Panther.
Yeah, I think absolutely. If you've, built the supporter base that is willing to go above and beyond for the betterment of the team, then that's part of your strength, isn't it? And yeah, you're right. You look in soccer circles, the tactics have evolved so much. There's stories of teams, leaking fake hotel details so fans think they're in a different place so the players can get a good night's sleep, and little bait and switch tactics just to make sure that everyone is the best prepared that they can be. I think it's fair game. Obviously, you can't do anything illegal, but the police will be on you. But yeah, it's. I think it's good fun. It's good value.
Yeah, I do like it. I think, as you say, I think he's made the mistake of launching this campaign a little too early, though. But yeah, I did love it. Yeah, so he said fireworks, burnouts, and screaming outside the hotel is highly recommended any time between 1 and 4 a.m. on Saturday. Egging the coaches' box is also encouraged. Bring eggs into the game and sneak them in if you can. And yes, if the Panthers are on the attack and we're a man or two short on defence, feel free to jump onto the field and get into the defensive line and make some hits. Everything goes this Saturday. Any questions, please DM me. I'd love to see his DMs at the moment. I tell you what, I reckon there'd be some Panthers fans getting in them.
Jeez, wouldn't that be, that'd be a dangerous DM to be in, I reckon. It'd be like something to do with Bailey Smith's Tinder DMs. But yeah, seriously, I love it. And like Lockie suggested, like this is, if you get a home final, this is the sort of stuff that you can put out. Look, it's probably not going to happen, let's be honest. But now, how many more extra eyes are going to be on this game because of this one DM that's got reported? I love it. This is what we tune into, finals footy for.
Yeah, we certainly do. Interestingly enough, this game, we'll talk about the All Blacks a little bit later on. This game actually overlaps with the All Blacks, which would have been unheard of years ago. So this will kick off, I think, 4 p.m. Australian time. And then the All Blacks game's at 5 p.m. or something like that. So there's an hour of free air, and then the last bit of the game will overlap. So all eyes on it in New Zealand, the better for the rugby league. The other one that I want to talk about with this one is the Melbourne Storm, obviously another one of the powerhouses, Lockie, from your part of the world. They've been right there when the whips are cracking, competing with this Penrith side over the last 4 or 5 years. They beat them in their first grand final in this 5 grand final run, and then Penrith have won 4 since. They are decimated. They're without their fullback, Ryan Pappenheisen. Jerome Hughes is injured, their halfback as well. They're ripe for the picking. They come up against a Bulldog side, but it's going to be interesting because it's never an easy trip to Melbourne. So there's a narrative here that maybe we might see some different teams emerging, but then there's the obvious piece of these teams just seem to find the next man up mentality. How do we see this shaping? Like, is Melbourne just going to keep Melbourning no matter who they bring in? Like, they've got some handy players coming in, the likes of Nick Meaney, Jonah Pezzett, who've played a lot of football this year.
Yeah, look, it's always going to be tough, I think, when you lose good players. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was the Canberra Raiders, right, that rested a bunch of players and got absolutely walloped on the weekend, right? So, look, as much as you can have that next man up kind of mentality and you have good replacements sitting on the bench, if you're going to lose your best players, then you're going to struggle. So in finals football of any code, any different kind of football, obviously you want your best players out on the pitch. So whilst Melbourne Storm have a very proud history of success in the NRL, you want your best players on the pitch to be able to deliver that.
Yeah, well, we'll see how it all shapes up, bros. Friday night, Melbourne up against Canterbury. Melbourne's still favourites for that game, interestingly. The Warriors, big outsiders at home against Penrith, the Sharks and the Roosters. And then Canberra, the minor premiers, managed to get a day game against the Broncos, which is a big advantage because it means their team gets a lot of turnaround, although to Lockie's point, most of their team didn't play last week. So the Broncos are renowned for playing a lot of Thursday and Friday night football, so a day game. Be interesting to see. Certainly a very open finals series. Something that will come down to 2 contenders and is very much in your wheelhouse, though, Brody. We're going to see it live and free. Well, free is not the right word, but if you've already got Netflix, it's free. Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford going toe-to-toe. The pugilism returns. Yeah,
definitely. And look, Crawford moving up a weight, and I think this is actually the first ever boxing fight promoted by Dana White, I believe, too, which is it's going to be interesting. I'm not really sure what to think of a boxing card on Netflix that isn't staged for money, but it looks like the real deal here, Chris. But
this one isn't.
Well, I think Crawford and Canelo. Look, it's definitely not Jake Paul or Mike Tyson, so it's a step up in some way there, Lockie. But yeah, you look at it in terms of styles. I think one way or another, I don't see there being a knockout. Terence is so slick. especially with his footwork. But I don't think he has the power to knock out, Canelo. So in terms of pure fight style, I think Canelo's going to win, and I think he's going to win at the distance. But it's going to be interesting if we can get him in tight. Canelo, I think he could finish him, but I don't see a way, especially with Crawford stepping up a weight, in any way that he finishes Canelo.
It's going to be an interesting one. Lockie, from your side, more so rather than the boxing, the sports media, the platform of Netflix now getting into this. We've seen YouTube, broadcasting the NFL more. This is really starting to change this landscape. I know it's a space that you've sort of got a real eye on, the two of you, but I'd love your thoughts in terms of, does this give boxing a broader footprint? Do you think there's people there that are, Netflix watchers that are watching their usual Netflix shows? I'm trying to think of some on there, but I'm having a mental blank because I only really go on there to watch sport and, quarterback and the other sports documentaries. But some of these people that might become a casual fan, jump on Sunday at lunchtime, going to watch their normal streaming show. Oh, the boxing's on. Let's have a look. Is that the angle that boxing's going for here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, sport is going to streaming. That's no secret. And the value is that you get not only the live product, but as you mentioned, all those kind of auxiliary things that sit around that with the documentaries and the fact that it's on demand and its internet is very accessible. And the fact that boxing are going to Netflix of all of those streamers means you're getting the number one pretty much outside of YouTube, right? And the advantage of the Netflix subscription is that the people are already paying for it, unlike YouTube. So, you've already got people who are going to be able to access it rather than like a NFL pay-per-view game on YouTube. So absolutely, in terms of accessibility for streamers, Netflix is number one behind the subscription that most people have. So being able to just have people turn on, I think they've had a couple of NFL games on there as well, right? They had the Christmas game and some other things. So I think Netflix are proving that this is something they want to do in terms of, are they actually producing the fight as well, or are they just broadcasting it?
I believe it's all of the production and everything put together is Netflix behind it with the Dana White Productions.
There you go. So they're actually, still ramping up their actual production of live sport as well. It's one thing to just put it on the screens, but to make it happen yourselves is a clear indication, I think, of where Netflix want to go with live sport.
Certainly is. We'll keep our eyes peeled for what they do next. It'll be interesting to see. We've seen some of the other players get into this. Obviously, Amazon Prime's made a big push with broadcasting cricket and different things. So we'll wait and see. It is time to send you down to the bench, bros. Have a little breather, mate. We're going to bring in the great man, the man on the ones and twos, JR Carter, to talk about the F1 at Monza. JR, I have a feeling that this has got you nearly as upset as if I started talking about Mitch Marsh.
Look, it certainly has. So just to recap, and good evening, boys. Just to recap, so bit of pit stop drama sort of towards the end of the race at Monza. Max Verstappen just doing a dominant Max performance, 20 seconds in front. Like, he's not getting caught. Like, it was just Max of old was back, which was really good to see. But there was a bit of a pit stop kerfuffle between the McLaren boys. It almost be called another Papaya incident at this point, where Lando's opted to pit second. Oscar's pitted, had a really great pit stop. Lando's pitted and his front left wheel gun has failed effectively. So he's had to sit in the pits for about 6 seconds. After this, they decided, for fairness, we're going to swap the cars back. And pit stops are a racing incident. What's going on here?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Lockie, we were talking about this before we recorded. It's obviously not just in terms of this race because, these guys are battling for second and third, but it makes a 6-point difference, which is a significant one in the championship. Had Oscar finished second, it'd be 37 points to gap. It's now down to 31. We're starting to close back towards, one DNF and a win for Lando could have that gap almost non-existent now. To JR's point, it's interesting to see where team orders come in and out. What's a racing incident? What's not? Lando could argue it wasn't his fault. It was, whoever's operating that gun on the front wheel. But at the end of the day, this is how the cookie crumbles, right?
So let me put this another way, and JR, I think you'll like this.
Okay.
If Lando Norris was, say, 40 points ahead in the championship and Oscar Piastri was leading a race and there were 1-2 McLarens and they go into a pit stop and by no fault of anyone, there is a slow pit stop and Oscar drops behind Lando and Lando would look to extend his lead at the top of the championship. Do you think Zach Brown is thinking anything else than, oh, great, we got the result we wanted without having to cause a fuss?
You're exactly right. Like, Zach Brown is a Lando Norris fan. I think that Oscar Piastri has caused a major drama within that team by just being better than Lando to start with. The real person whose opinion I think we're going to hear at some point about this is Mark Webber. So Oscar's manager, he's seen these sorts of team orders play out before. I have no doubt that he was on the phone, that there's emails coming through to Zach Brown. There's just Zach Brown's going to look at his window and Mark Webber's just going to be standing there, just ready for him at this point.
JR, my favourite bit of all of this was not the reaction from anyone, anything to do with anything papaya, but from the reaction from the man who won the race, Max Verstappen. I don't have the quote in front of me, but basically he just lost his shit at it.
He really did. He was having a giggle, just like GP sort of sending the message that, oh yeah, they're swapping back. He's like, what? Because he had a slow stop and he was giggling. He's like, he I think has the least opinion of Lando at this point. Oscar's probably knows that Lando's whinging in the background. And reports are that Lando hasn't really spoken to the team since. He's very upset with his pit crew as opposed to clearing the air. He's just dug his head in and doesn't want to talk to anyone now.
Yeah, it's a wild time. At the end of the day, it's an interesting one. A slow pit stop is part of racing. So, I'm not sure what changes here, but I don't think anything changes, Lockie. I think it just further clarifies for anyone that says that, us Aussies have got a chip in our shoulder about how we think Zach Brown views Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, absolutely. We were kind of all under the impression that whoever was leading the championship was going to be that kind of number one preferred driver. And, the reality is, however unlikely it was that, they were going to be caught in the drivers' championship, they've now opened up the door just a little bit more for someone like a Max Verstappen, obviously, to come in and sweep it away. And they're doing that for the risk of getting Lando Norris a better chance at the Drivers' Championship. So, look, yeah. I think we all know where they sit now.
Yeah, and we're at the point where McLaren's got to make a choice very soon too. They will get to a point where now mathematically, Lando needs to win 7 of the next 8 races to be a chance to win the championship if Oscar's performing even in second place. We're at the point now where choices need to be made. McLaren need to back a winner. Otherwise, someone like Max could sneak back in. Max's car's suddenly taking off again. What happens if this keeps going over the next couple of races? But we'll have to wait and see.
We certainly will. That would be, I guess, a little bit ironic if Max managed to sneak in. But I'm a bit concerned that JR's suggestion that someone needs to make some decisions. If anyone from McLaren who's in the Norris camp is listening, Lockie, that we're going to see internal sabotage or something. Is that what JR's suggesting?
Well, we've seen almost along the same lines in F1 before. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a great story from what's his name, Nico, Lewis's McLaren teammate. What's his name, JR? I forget. Sorry?
Nico Hulkenberg?
Nico Rosberg.
No, not Hulkenberg. Rosberg, that's it.
Yeah.
There's a great story from Nico Rosberg talking about Schumacher in a toilet right before a qualifying session and knocking on the door and trying to get in, and Michael just waiting till the absolute last moment to be able to get out and run to his car. So Nico's a little bit unsettled before a qualifying session. There's little things like that teammates will do, and I don't think Oscar's the kind of person that would go down that track, but we've seen, interesting teammate moments in F1 before.
Well, something we do know, JR, from all of what we're seeing coming out is that Lando doesn't seem super popular with most of the drivers. So that would be great if we saw someone else do, like the F1 movie and just, sacrifice themselves to take out Lando in a race so that Oscar wins because, he's the popular Aussie on the grid or something. That would be wild scenes. Yeah,
we don't need Oscar to necessarily win. We just need Lando to lose.
Well, there we go. On that note, JR, any other key takeaways from the Monza race as we look towards the run home?
Look, in all honesty, not really. It was just a procession up front. Realistically, Max was just dominant from the get go. So,
I mean, Lance Stroll finished last out of the cars that were still on the track. But again, like you said, just a procession and standard operating.
Just regular day. We're back at Baku this weekend, which is an earlier race for us, 9 p.m.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing that in Azerbaijan. A big thank you to you, JR. As always, we'll let you get back to the magic on the buttons behind the scenes. Well, Broads, back on deck, mate. Let's throw straight to you. I know it's Lockie's wheelhouse, but I know you would have been excited by this as well. Big Ange and his Greek connections have landed him back in the EPL.
Yeah, how good is this? And, what a welcome he's going to have taking Nottingham Forest straight into a match against Arsenal too. So it's going to be a very interesting watch, I think, Ange at Nottingham. And look, you look at it and we know Ange loves to play this all-out attacking style, but is he going to be able to do that in the Premier League with Nottingham Forest. I think there's going to be a few teething issues early, but it's going to be an interesting one. I'd love to get Lockie's opinion on how he sees the rest of the year playing out, obviously, especially with the way that the last manager's fallen out with the owner.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating journey, and I think there is a wide array of possibilities. I think he could relegate Nottingham Forest, and I think he could get them top 4, win the Champions League with the Europa League to boot. So anything could happen. Look, Australians love Ange Postecoglou. I'm probably slightly more on the pessimistic side and agreeing with maybe some overseas opinions just in terms of the quality that he's going to come up against. He can't just win all the time when you get to the Premier League. And look, we all know the quote, he wins things in his second year. Now, we will have to maybe ask him just to stipulate whether this counts as his first or not season at Nottingham Forest. Is it a full season before that quote comes true? I'm not sure. But yeah, this is going to be different because obviously the clubs that he's worked at, Brisbane Roar is probably the exception, but it's in a competitively balanced league with a salary cap in the A-League. But you then go to Yokohama and Celtic and Tottenham. You're dealing with the clubs with the top end of resources for their league. And now Nottingham Forest won't have that. And the bar for success for them is different. And qualifying for Europe last year was amazing. Now, they are a very storied club. Before they were relegated back down to the Championship a little while ago. Obviously, they've had 3 or 4 years now in the Premier League. They were a first division side. They have a European Cup to their name. So there is that reputation that Ange has to deal with, and I'm sure getting them back to those heights is the goal of the owner in terms of appointing him. But yeah, absolutely anything could happen, and we're here for the ride. I was really looking forward to having him in the Premier League, not coaching for Tottenham, so I can actually get behind him a little bit more. And then, as Brody pointed out, I saw that his first game is against Arsenal, so that's going to have to wait at least another week. But the good news is that it's the early game this week on Saturday night at 9:30 on the eastern seaboard of Australia. So friendly viewing times. And I think Channel 9 might have to consider putting that one back on free to air if they're going to get some good numbers on TV this weekend.
What do we think of Tottenham?
I don't think I'm allowed to say. Chris, am I allowed to swear in the show?
Yeah, no. Well, we might just leave that. But 14th of December is the big clash against Tottenham. We look forward to that. But yeah, I agree. I was actually going to suggest that surely Channel 9's got to throw this free to air in the time slot it is everything else. I think Nottingham Forest will find themselves with a bit of a bandwagon of Aussie fans, a smaller budget. Looking forward to seeing there's going to be a lot fall on the likes of Elliot Anderson to try and execute whatever Ange tries to deliver. Saw him play for England only a couple of days ago. While we're talking soccer, very briefly, Lockie, the Socceroos, and hence me rocking the Watford jersey, winning the Soccer Ashes. Not that surprisingly, the Kiwis put up some good fight, but were clearly outclassed by the Aussies.
Yeah, we're clearly outclassed by the Aussies in the second half of the second game, it must be said. I think before that, it was a significantly more even battle. In fact, they probably had the better of play in the first game, despite Max Ballard's little nick in the 87th minute to win that 1-0. Sorry, so they put up a good fight, but yeah, lots of encouraging signs for the Australians. A win in the Soccer Ashes, which is cool. It is kind of funny to me that they kind of hype this series up with the little razor tin and the ashes from the cigars or whatever. And then the trophy that they present to the players at the end of the tournament is like a little Champions League mini replica trophy. We can't get the real thing out there, or even something that looks like the real thing. But yeah, look, the person who rose that trophy for Australia, Alessandro Ciccati, captaining the national team at just 21 years old, is an exceptional story. I believe the 4th youngest Socceroo ever to captain the team, which is pretty amazing and speaks very highly of what Tony Popovic thinks of him. And in the end, it was the young kids that stole the show. Nestori Irankunda and Mohamed Toure, the 2 South Australian boys, good mates, spent a lot of time around camp with each other. Not that Tony Popovic actually knew they were good mates before camp, and he was thinking, those 2 guys are spending a lot of time with each other at lunches and stuff like that. But yeah, they stole the show and really shining the light for potentially, don't say it too loudly, but maybe another golden generation coming through. It's starting to be said more and more, but I think just the flood of Australians going overseas and having them go and learn as footballers, and especially Irankunda at the Watford, like the shirt you're wearing, Chris, and then coming back to Australia and showing that off is just so encouraging and paints a really bright future, not just for the 2026 World Cup, of course, less than a year away, but for the future beyond that as well.
It certainly does. In terms of that, Brady, I'm hoping it's not a golden generation, but we actually build towards that being more of just a new norm for Australia with, how accessible world football is now, how accessible the A-League is in terms of a product. Obviously, hoping that continues to build and we continue to see more of these Australian clubs developing talent that goes on overseas. We've certainly got a few of them at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I love what Lockie, when he touched on Sokati as well. So obviously had the pleasure of doing a bit of work alongside the Socceroos and doing some filming with the lads. And he's actually one of those guys, you walk into a room and he's usually this quiet and well-spoken, but when you speak to him, you can't help but just hang on every single word that he says. And I think he's a great choice for a captain. He's just, the kids talk about aura, and just being actually around him, you actually get this weird feeling around it. So I love what they've done, and he's definitely going to be one to watch. Obviously, after that game in Perth, he spoke so highly after that Bay each goal of what playing in front of that Optus crowd was like, and he summed it up beautifully in about 30 seconds. So, yeah, I think that was great. And, yeah, fingers crossed it is a new norm, and I wouldn't be surprised if it is. We've got a lot of players now playing in the Championship, some now obviously playing in the Premier League, and look, I don't think, as much as we'd all like it, I don't think Irakunda is going to be spending heaps of time at Watford in the near future.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I know it's sending off Lockie's Twitter profile in England. He's gone absolutely... He's massive in Watford, as they say, Lockie Avil and the Roundball Australia crew, because Watford is still puzzled as to how they got Nestor. But anyway, closer to home, in a league that he used to once grace and dominate at different points for a very brief window that one day we'll look on so fondly. The A-League, despite all of its dramas with Western United, has dropped week one's draw. We believe that they'll have the rest of the season out by the time this episode goes to air, Lockie, but they might have to still change it anyway because there's all sorts of things still up in the air.
There is still plenty up in the air. I can confirm that Western United absolutely will not partake in the A-Leagues this season, which is just has to be drawn as the line in the sand. This is not happening because we're only a month away from the season now. So, yeah, the first round of fixtures have come out. I think some other leaks here and there. Probably by the time this airs, we'll know the full season. But at least we're moving forward. There is plenty going on. Western United seems like they have an appeal or a court date, twice a week at the moment. So more information will come out as we go, just in terms of how they fight for their existence as a football club and hopefully to return to the A-Leagues in season 26-27. But they're out this year. It's not going to happen. Their players' contracts have been terminated. They're seeking new employment for the upcoming season. There's not going to be any salary cap or visa spot exceptions for the other A-League clubs. So 12 clubs does not go into 13 full player lists. So people are going to miss out, unfortunately. I think it is a nice coincidence that we have the Australian Championship running this year. So some of those players will probably have the opportunity to play at least a very high, if not professional level of football for a couple of months until that January window opens. But yeah, plenty of drama. But thankfully the fixtures, at least now, are starting to come out, and it looks like we have a clear image of what this A-League season is going to look like.
Well, the positive is there's no buys in the men's. There will be buys in the women's, though, because they didn't have them last year when they had the full slate, Brody. I'm excited. There's an F3 derby in week one to close out the round. And as much as I know that some of Lockie's Adelaide friends in the Roundball Australia crew, not mentioning names, are very low on Adelaide, Friday night in Adelaide to get things started, it's always a vibe at Hindmarsh. So I think those two things, round one, they're probably not bad starting points.
Yeah, and let's not forget, I think this time last year, everyone wrote off Adelaide because it seemed like everyone was leaving, and then they brought in, a bunch of young kids, and they actually did all right considering, especially for the first half of the year. And look, yeah, there for a while, it looked like whoever was leaving just turned the lights off there at Hindmarsh on your way out, and that'll just about be it. But no, it should be interesting, I think, Adelaide United. You never really know. You sort of see all these names coming in and out of the A-Leagues, but until you probably get 3 or 4 games in, sometimes even longer, you never really know what the sides are actually like.
It's a long season. There's lots of twists and turns, and I think Stephen Mork might have been one of the last ones out. He literally played in the Australia Cup for them this year and then left Lockie, and you had a really good sit-down with him, and we won't try and break that down, but if people want to check that out, really worth a watch on Roundball Australia's YouTube channel. I would encourage people to go and have a look at that. Boys, it's getting to summer. The cricket's coming, but I'm a little bit depressed. Pat Cummins. Now, it's not a stress fracture. They're just stresses, Brody. I'm not sure what the difference is. I think, it's the precursor to the precursor or something like that, but he's being rested up. We've seen this. This is similar to what happened with Jasprit Bumrah, I'm told, when he had to withdraw from the Sydney Test. And his return was back to the IPL where he's bowling 4 over stints, and that was about 3 months, which is roughly the time frame that Captain Pat's got to get ready for the Ashes. I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, I am. I'd be a lot more nervous if we didn't have Scott Boland waiting in the wings. Put it that way.
There it is.
But
Didn't say a lot.
No, absolutely not. But look, he's not going to play all 5 tests. I think that's clear now. And he even said on radio the other day he goes into every single summer not expecting to play 5 tests. But if it does go that way, then well done. And we do have that depth in the fast bowling department. But I think we'd love to see that one. That different kind. We know Scott Boland's going to come in and he's going to hit that line of length. I'd be probably slightly more worried if we're playing someone other than England, who they've shown, especially here in Australia, the lack of, to really put on that big score and really actually bat out their conditions. We know what Bazball's like. They want to score quickly. But I think this Australian lineup, if they were to have someone and really, let's say first 2 days, really just face them out, I think that would actually go a long way to them winning the Ashes rather than playing this Bazball kind of cricket.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And to Brodie's point, Lockie, obviously we do have Scott Boland in the wings, and I agree. He's obviously, numbers do stack up really well, especially at the MCG. But my query is to the point that Pat Cummins wouldn't have played 5 tests. If Pat Cummins, let's say the worst case, is ruled out for the Ashes, does Scott Boland play 5 tests, and then it's the next man up after that we start to go to that next level? I know we've got, some young guys. Fergus O'Neill's one that jumps out to me. I'm a huge fan of him, but it's a big ask then to be thrown into a debut in, say, the 4th test of the Ashes at the MCG on Boxing Day, or the 5th test in the Ashes at the SCG when things are tied at 1 or 2 all, say.
Yeah, look, that's a fair argument, but Scott Boland didn't get 6 of the G until he got 6 of the G, right? Like, there's got to be spaces for these, new bowlers to come in and actually make their mark. And look, Scott Boland is an exceptional player to be coming off the bench, off the pine, putting into the Australian Test setup. And I have no doubt that the 2 or 3 in behind him are also, up to that level where they can come in and make an immediate impact. And Australia's had an extraordinary stock of fast bowlers for as long as they've played cricket. So I don't think there's a massive concern. Obviously, leadership is the other thing. Pat Cummins is an exceptional leader of this team. Obviously, Smith will take the reins there, and I know he likes to have an input in things usually, like his mate Marnus Labuschagne. They're always talking about stuff. But look, I think the Aussies will be all right, and still having him around the squad, I think, is the main thing, and his bowling's a bonus because we know he's a pretty damn good test bowler.
Well, we certainly do. There are a few in the ranks. We'll see how it all stacks up. It could all be for nothing. Captain Pat could be, all of his environmental health and all the other wonderful things that he does for the world might, give him good karma, and he might be back in time for the first test anyway. The good news is, bros, we'll get to see the bat off. It all starts over in India in just under a week's time as well. India A versus Australia A, and then into the Sheffield Shield. So I think that's probably where we have more concerns, is making sure we've got the right batters. Our bowlers should be reasonably okay.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, touched on it before. We haven't had a fast bowler debut since 2021, and that was Scott Boland. So that just goes to show how strong we've been in the bowling department. So we are due for some fresh blood soon. But yeah, like you said, for so long our bowling has carried us in Test matches, and I think we've probably made below par scores more than we've made above par scores, especially across the last 3 or 4 years. And our bowling attack, it's so good that we actually managed to win Tests we should get nowhere near. And we've seen that time and time again. I would love just to see batters just bat time. That's all we need to do coming up. It's just bat time. And if we do that against England, we know the style of cricket they play probably doesn't suit Australia conditions, especially with these bouncy pitches. So I think I'd just love to see over in India. I don't care if it's a 250 ball 80 or a 90. I'd much rather that than 100 off 110 or something over there against a second string bowling attack.
Yeah, it'll be good to keep an eye. We will certainly keep everyone up to date with that. To close out the show, let's talk about a bit of basketball, bros. I'm going to throw this straight to you because we're on a tight schedule. Josh Giddey, 4 years, $152 million Australian after all of the uncertainty. Great to see the man getting paid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's now the third highest highest paid Australian athlete behind the man you mentioned earlier, and someone playing over in the Super Bowl, I believe. And look, it's actually pretty rare, and is in pretty rare air to actually get contract like this as a pass first point guard. Obviously, there's so many of the big name guards over there in the US who they put up a lot of points as well. And shooting's probably it's not so much the guard like it used to be where it was setting up the play. But Josh Giddey now, I think he comes into games, and a lot of people, and there's a lot of critics, especially on the Bulls at the moment, that are saying you're paying this much for a role player. but that's what wins you chips in the end. It's role players like this. You look at, the biggest names. Look at OKC. Yes, Gildas Alexander, he had a phenomenal season, but it was what the team did to surround it. Role players everywhere that come off the bench, and I really rate this decision by the Chicago Bulls. And look, OKC, obviously they've done very well out of this trade, but Bulls just need to stick with him because he's going to be a star, and I'm really looking forward to this season.
Yeah, it's really exciting, Lockie. It's big numbers, but again, these guys can often have short-lived careers. We've seen that, as Brody said, he tucks in now behind Ben Simmons and Jordan Mailata as the two highest-paid Aussies, overtakes fellow NBA player Josh Green and a guy called Jason Day who's just plodding around at a lazy $18 million US a year playing a bit of golf. So I think what we've seen from Giddey and some of those highlight reels, who can forget that half-court shot winner, these are... these are the things that people get paid for in this day and age, as well as, bringing in the fans, drawing in the casuals. And Giddey, as a role player, as Brody said, is doing that, though, because he still fills the highlight reel at times too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, as Australians, we love him because he loves playing for Australia as well, unlike one other particular Australian basketball player. So, anyone that gets around the national colours, I think, the fan base gets around them as well. And clearly he's lighting it up in the NBA at the moment. And he seems to be rewarded quite sweetly for doing so.
I think
doesn't mind playing suburban basketball either.
Yeah, no. He'll play basketball anywhere. If you've got a pick-up game and you see Josh Giddey, just let him know and he'll be there. I think you might have been doing a drive-by on the guy at number 1 on the list by some chance there, Lockie. But anyway, that's why my Australian Boomers singlet has Josh Giddey on it. It does not have anyone else. Kurzweil, I don't think he's got one anymore. But boys, thank you very much. As always, if people want to go more in-depth on the soccer, Lockie, they can check out Round Ball Australia and your wonderful content on YouTube. And Broads, Third Man Up podcast, yourself and Spider, he'll be getting revved up, the big fella, as we get into finals.
Yeah, absolutely he is. He's very excited, especially being up there on the Gold Coast. He reckons it's like the Q clash, and he said that they genuinely don't like each other. There's not this, this put on, like he says, the Sydney clash. He said they genuinely don't like each other. Touk Miller and Dane Zorko are already throwing barbs on radio, and I think it's going to be a cracking match to watch.
I like a bit of rivalry, but as always, thanks, Brody. Thank you, Lockie, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Well, big thank you again to our co-hosts on the panel today. Of course, the man behind the ones and the twos, coming in with all the motorsport oil, J.R. Carter. Great to have him on board. Lockie Abel from Round Ball Australia, going across all the sporting landscape, talking plenty, focusing in on that football. If you want more Round Ball action, check out the Round Ball Australia pod. You can find it on YouTube or all your podcast platforms. And of course, Brodie Burrows back again, getting around it all, talking about the AFL, the boxing, and plenty more. You can find him on the Third Man Up podcast alongside former AFL superstar Spider Everett. But as always, a big thank you to you for tuning in to your home of the black and white of sports. No great opinions here. There'll be plenty more daily doses coming. We'll be covering off on a little bit of the Davis Cup, which is coming up this weekend as Australia take on Belgium. We'll also be talking about the World Athletics Championship and looking ahead to the Rugby Championship with the All Blacks and the Wallabies, and of course the Women's Rugby World Cup in the coming days. So if you haven't already, head on down, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That way you'll be following along and you'll get those notifications here on YouTube as to when all those episodes are dropping to keep you up to date. And we'd love it if you could share the channel with a friend as well. But until next time we drop another episode for your sporting coverage, a big thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again about your sports very, very soon.